Day. America's listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Melanie Mendiola.
And this is Ricky Hernandez. We're with the Guam Economic Development Authority.
And we're both alumni of the University of Guam. We're calling on our fellow alumni to make an investment in Guam's future by contributing to the G is for Giving campaign. With your donation, you are giving more students the opportunity to graduate, making Guam a better place.
To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu before December 31st or call 735-2957 for more information.
Viva UOG!
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
It happened after the annual Grambling Southern football game. At least 10 people wounded when shots rang out in New Orleans' French Quarter early Sunday morning.
Investigators are trying to piece together what led to the early morning incident, but according to New Orleans Police Superintendent Sean Ferguson, there is no certainty on who is behind it.
Our officers were out here throughout this entire incident within feet when this incident occurred. Unfortunately, there were so many people out here who were unable to determine who was actually firing these shots at that time.
Ferguson called it a cowardly and senseless act. There was a person being questioned, but it wasn't known early on if that person was involved. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell says police will get to the bottom of what happened. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
If you didn't find what you wanted on Black Friday, there is always Cyber Monday.
Consumers did some record-breaking shopping online on both Thanksgiving Day and Black Friday, dropping a whopping $11.6 billion. E-commerce behemoths and smaller retailers both seeing an increase in online sales. Experts say the shopping is not done. Consumers are expected to spend even more on Cyber Monday, possibly setting a new record with an estimated $9.4 billion in sales, up 18.9% from last year.
Fox's Ann Carrick. Actress Shelley Morrison died Sunday of heart failure at the age of 83, her career spanning more than half a century. She played Sister Sixto alongside Sally Field in The Flying Nun, starting in 1967. More recently, Morrison played Salvadoran maid Rosario Salazar on Will and Grace. She was only booked to appear in one episode on the hit comedy, but quickly became a fan favorite and remained on the show. I'm Jay Metzler, and this is Fox News.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with a true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine. A bistro look that feels like home. Their menu features local and traditional flavors with a twist. From their famous Kelaguen Hafa to fresh ahi poke salad and their award-winning barbecue ribs. Mescla takes your favorite local dishes and serves them with extra flair that you'll only find at Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Stop by their newest location in the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. For reservations, call 969-2652. Mescla, a true taste of Guam. Now here's Bob in the traffic chopper. What's up, Bob?
Traffic's at a standstill right now with a guy standing in the middle of the street holding a sign. Let me zoom in. The sign says, "Free the fence."
Free the fence. And what does that mean, Bob?
Not sure, but the guy's out there smiling and waving in short shorts with a weird-looking little hat. He's got a sign in one hand and what looks like, is it? What? It is. It's a bottle of beer in the other.
Oh, no. That's Ray.
Free the fences in your mind with The Ray Gibson Show. Weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on 93.3 The Point.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And, And one of the things that I need to make sure that I keep talking about is the government's, any government's willingness to infringe upon that right needs to be sternly criticized right here on Tall Tales. So welcome, international radio listening audience, to another episode of the top-rated afternoon FM talk show in the Western Pacific. If you want to be part of the talk, 888-8255. And if you're in the North American numbering plan anywhere from the northern part of Maine to Key West, San Diego, Seattle, wherever, 671 is our area code here. And for our international radio listening audience, the country code of the United States of America is 1. So call us up, and we'd be glad to hear what you have to say about some of the really important issues on today's topic. I'm going to go straight from here. I don't have any Second Amendment tidbits today. I've got a pretty lengthy card, so I thought I'd better put aside any Second Amendment sermonizing today because we may not even have enough time to get through the entire card. So we're going to start out with, where's a good place to start this program, Real Joe Cruz?
Probably Zemi-Yakutni would be a great place to start.
Zemi-Yakutni it is. The inspiring music from Meet the Press. I wonder if Chuck Todd watches this program on Facebook to pick up pointers for his version of Meet the Press. He probably does, right?
It wouldn't surprise me one bit, sir.
Okay, welcome, Chuck. Welcome to Tall Tales. Meet the Press. Zemi-Yakutni is our backwards play on words here. Press the Meet the Press, where we analyze the editorials of the two daily newspapers, examine them for content, which in the case of the Daily News is almost impossible, and mark them up and give the better of the two the coveted Blue Star Award that I use my blue pencil for. Now, we've had a newcomer into the field here just last week. It used to be the Daily News versus the Post, which was sort of like an MMA boxer fighting his kid sister. You always knew who was going to win. But a new entry, the Candid News had an editorial, which actually got the coveted Blue Star. Yeah. The title of it was "What Taxpayers Didn't Save This Black Friday," and it was the better of the three, which is saying it was better than the Post. So today we have the Post and the Daily News. The Daily News never disappoints. They never write their own editorials. Why write your own editorial when you can just copy and paste something from USA Today and run it on your editorial page? It doesn't cost as much. You don't have to put any effort into it. And you don't run the risk of, like with a local editorial, sometimes a local editorial, I suspect, causes the publisher, the managing editor, and the editorial page editor of a newspaper to receive the dreaded Atan Baba when they go out in public. Yeah, because sometimes a good editorial has to call out somebody and say, "Hey, buddy, this was your job, and you didn't do it right." So if you always run something from USA Today, you have Atan Baba proofed your editorial page. I suspect it's been a long time since anybody down at the Daily News got an Atan Baba from anyone mentioned in its editorials, because they haven't done an editorial for so long I can't remember. So the Daily News today picks one up from the USA Today editorial board, and it's called Presidents are not kings. I never knew. Did you know that, Real Joe Cruz?
I had no idea.
Yeah, presidents are not kings. And this goes to a snotty line by a U.S. District Court judge weighing in on one of President Trump's motions to quash a subpoena. Not good jurisprudence to wisecrack along like that. That's one of the reasons that I developed something of a disdain from Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia, who I know is the darling of conservatives, but he certainly was not my favorite Supreme Court judge, seeming to thrive more on the wisecracks than on the jurisprudence. Anyhow, a district court judge came out with that wisecrack, and of course it was candy for the USA Today editorial board, because they're always looking for new reasons, well, not new reasons, any reason to bash Donald Trump. They think that the definition of a newspaper editorial is 600 words bashing Donald Trump. Anything else is not really a newspaper editorial. So no difference today. Now, with respect to the Post called him. You know, the Post bent over the plate, bent over the catcher's shoulder, and watched that fastball come whistling right down the middle, right over the heart of the plate at about belt level. And the Daily, as you were in the Post, said, Steve Reich. Yeah, they called a strike. In at least 2 gubernatorial administrations spanning almost 9 years, we've heard doctors speak out about bad management and conditions at Guam Memorial that they say have placed patients at risk. Among the latest to step out in public at the risk of GMH administration's possible retaliation is, be ready to cue up your Law and Order music there, Will Joe Hughes. Are you ready? Okay. Among the latest to step out in public at the risk of GMH administration's possible retaliation is Dr. James Last, a GMH emergency room physician who has been at the hospital for more than 2 decades. So far, it looks like he's got the last word. Last describes a situation in which the newly appointed doctor friends of a new in which the newly appointed doctor friends of the new gubernatorial administration as dual directors stand to benefit from the status quo. Last describes terrible working conditions that expose sick patients to even more risk, while hard-working nurses try to get by for much lower pay than their mainland counterparts. The ER has become overcrowded with up to 15 to 24 patients who have been admitted to the hospital but kept for days waiting for beds upstairs on the floors, Last said. Not only is this poor medicine, but dangerous to patients' health and safety. They lie throughout the hallway, coughing. You know, maybe some of them want to be talk show hosts, huh, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm sure.
Coughing and choking with black mold emanating from the vents overhead. They have to attend to their personal needs with visitors walking up and down the hallways and are exposed to all the noise and trauma without even so much as safety curtains. In today's letter to the editor, Dr. Vince Akimoto also decries GMH's overcrowding, which will become much worse if an epidemic sends many more people to the government hospital. Guam is going through a dengue outbreak, and the flu season could very well send even more patients to the hospital in the coming weeks. Unfortunately, for the past several weeks, Guam Memorial Hospital and Guam Regional Medical City have been engaged in a dangerous game of chicken, Akimoto writes. Guam's beleaguered acute care facilities have each been diverting patients away from their overcrowded emergency rooms while frazzled ambulance crews try to figure out where they will take the next Next, take the sick and dying. While elected officials in current and prior regimes have also said funding for GMH is the excuse, some doctors have been brave enough to say that the way GMH is managed and the political interference on management has been and is a problem. During Eddie Calvo's administration, doctors said the same thing. One doctor who blew the whistle on GMH under Calvo was demoted from being Assistant Associate Administrator of Medical Services at the hospital, and she subsequently left the island. Dr. Kozue Shimabukuro. Now, almost everybody on the island mispronounced that word. Her name is Shimabukuro. It's not...
Okay.
Yeah. It's not Shimabukuro.
Shimabukuro.
Shimabukuro, yeah. So she left Guam for America Shima. Do you know where that is, Real Joe Cruz?
Hi.
Okay. Yeah, so Shimabukuro said millions of dollars worth of medical claims forms were waiting for doctors to fill out so the hospital can send bills out. When physicians were suspended for failing to fill out their medical charts, someone from high above pardons their suspension and frees them from accountability, Shimabukuro said. In 2017, Shimabukuro, who served as a pediatric ICU doctor at GMH, described less than ideal healthcare settings and children dying unnecessarily, in part because of it. When I came here as a physician, I have seen month after month kids have died of diseases that they shouldn't die from, like pneumonia or sepsis. In this day and age, we have pneumonia and sepsis. We should be able to address and treat the disease, Shimabukuro said. There were other doctors before last who described the hospital as dysfunctional. It takes a lot of courage to criticize an incumbent administration in a very public way. Here are some of the doctor's public comments. Dr. Nicole Nanaj wrote in 2018 in legislative testimony she has been coerced to, quote, bend the rules in favor of certain GMH vendors. Dr. Jerome Landstrom, in legislative testimony in 2018, GMHA is awarding millions of dollars annual for physician services contract behind closed doors. These contracts are based on chinchulli politics and personal bias, while bypassing Guam contract law and Department of Administration oversight. Throwing more money at GMH does not assure its fiscal viability, Landstrom said. Well, you kind of got to hand it to Dr. Landstrom for his remarks.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, the real Joe is chuckling because he knows that Dr. Landstrom's specialty is hand surgery, right? All right. Dr. Sam Friedman, an oncologist at a 2018 legislative hearing, asked a series of questions, including, why were no incident reports ever filed so that dangerous practices can be reviewed? Why are there no morbidity conferences to review deaths? Why is GMH paying millions of dollars to physicians to be on call, and yet these same physicians are still allowed to bill separately for their services? I've been here for 14 years, said Freeman in 2018, and when I came here, GMH was in a mess. And now it's in an even bigger mess. The change in administration in January 2019 gave many on Guam hope that real change would begin at GMH. But from what Dr. Last has described, it may very well be that real institutional changes have not occurred just yet. It is the time that investigators outside of Guam's sphere of influence to the scrutiny on at least three fronts: management and political interference, abuse of funds, including federal, and safety of patients. The public needs an independent and honest investigation into the management of the hospital. This scrutiny could very well save lives and prevent money from being wasted. Yeah, so there's an old saying, physician, cure thyself. Well, hospital, you'd better admit yourself to your own emergency ward here, because people are, I think, folks are really, really fed up with what's going on at the hospital. So no competition again today, so it's time now for that coveted blue star, which Guam Daily Post. That's 156 for the Guam Daily Post, 55 for the Daily News, and 1 for Candid News. You better watch out. Daily News, fair warning, you better watch out. 55 more editorials and Candid News is going to pass you by. And they don't even have a printing press. Okay, so I got a card today. And let's see, I've got 7 items on the card. I start out with Lou, that's Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, versus a shadow. So we've never had this before. The card is generally patterned after a boxing match. As a matter of fact, when Michael Knight does the producing, he rings a bell as though it were the start of a boxing match. Can you do that, Real Joe Cruz?
I used to be able to do that. What happened to that?
I give up.
I gotta look for that.
Your questions are too hard for me. Yeah, so we patterned it after a card at a boxing match. Or in some ways like the calendar, a court calendar. But it's always been real boxing. This time, though, we've got some shadow boxing. Lou, instead of taking on a real opponent, is just out there shadow boxing, you know, kind of faking like she's sparring with somebody, but there's nobody there. And then we've got Tina Rose Munya Barnes versus Judge Munson of the District Court of Guam, a senior active judge from the District Court of Saipan, who sits by designation sometimes in the District Court of Guam. We've got Jim Moylan versus the people of Jonia. We've got Janella versus GovGuam employees. And I've got Therese Terlahi versus Lou. This is not shadow boxing, because Therese took a swing at Lou. And then the last item, or the second to the last item, the penultimate item on the card is Dr. Last versus Annie Bordallo, Jolene Uggan, and Larry Lizama. I'm holding that one until the end because I'd like the folks during drive time to have the benefit of the discussion. Spoiler alert, a new member of the Tall Tales think tank, who is a medical doctor, has weighed in on this. And if he's listening today, I'm hoping he'll weigh in during that portion of the card. I'm not going to mention the name of the doctor who is the new addition to the Tall Tales think tank, but if you know someone named Dr. Vince Akimoto, that's close enough. And then finally, I've got Antonio Gramsci versus Eol. And this is pretty interesting, too, so you're going to want to stick around for that. Okay, so we're starting the program off right here. We got a phone call from... Hey, you finally opened the Tom line.
I did.
I was wondering, you know, if I don't tell you to open the Tom line, apparently you're not going to do it.
You're right.
This is our Tom.
This is, yep.
This is our Tom. Well, good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, young Marine.
That's me.
Are you still simplifying?
Always simplify.
I got a quick question for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did I understand that the Decolonization Commission had received federal grant money, about $300,000?
From the Department of Interior to conduct an educational campaign. You're right.
Yeah, so it was the Department of the Interior, and that is federal money, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I didn't know if you were listening earlier, but Wampat Borja was on the show on News Talk Radio on the afternoon from 12 noon to 2 p.m. show. And he's saying that the reason why we have the right not to include status quo in one of the options for decolonization is because we are not using federal money. We're only using local money. He said we are unlike Puerto Rico, where Puerto Rico was being forced to include status quo as one of the options for their political choices because they were using federal money. So Wampat Borja was just totally misinformed, right?
Well, either he was totally misinformed or he was totally misinforming. Take your choice. But let me weigh in on that, okay? Yeah. Puerto Rico has taken a couple of cracks at it. The United States Congress, as far as I remember, has never gotten involved and said, we are going to do a vote to determine the wishes of the folks of Puerto Rico. Now, it could very well be that influential people in Congress said, we're not going to pay any attention to you guys down there in Puerto Rico unless you ask that question in your plebiscite. I follow what's going on in Puerto Rico to some extent. There's a Puerto Rico report that I read every week, but I can't tell you that I'm as up on it as I am on our own situation here. But as far as our situation is concerned here, whether or not the so-called Commission on Decolonization, which is a misnomer, that's not what it is. It's not a Commission on Decolonization. It's a Commission for Chamorro Independence. But whether, what they decide is to be included on their ballot is not a function of whether or not they're getting federal law. It's a function of what the legislature said should be on that ballot. And the legislature has not said that the folks of Guam should have the option of determining that they kind of like things the way they are. So I hope that answers your question, Tom.
Oh, yes, it did. And he just doesn't want to admit that all they're trying to do is just separate Guam from the United States of America.
It's very, if you stop and think about it, it's really so obvious because there are three choices. It's kind of like, I'm going to give you a choice for dinner, Tom. I'm going to give you can choose from three different things. One, you can choose a cheeseburger. Two, you could choose 3 arsenic pills, or 3, a large tablespoon of castor oil. Which one do you think you're going to want?
The burger, of course.
Of course. And the way this thing is structured, we all know that, and I've explained this so many times, that statehood is just beyond the realm of possibility for anyone who is not going to be born in at least 25 years from now. Anybody who's alive now is never, even if you were born today, you're not going to live long enough to see the state of Guam. Free association is a will-o'-the-wisp. You can't get there from here because free association means an agreement between 2 independent states. Guam is not an independent state. The United States is not able to enter into an agreement of free association with it like it did with the former islands in the Trust Territory, the islands in the former Trust Territory. So that leaves just one thing, independence. And I would have a little bit more respect, and it wouldn't take much for Mr. Melvin Wonpat Bora if he came right out and said, what we want is independence. Because the only way that they would be able to get what they want is if Guam separated from the United States. So the separatist agenda is attempting to gaslight the people into saying, well, you know, this isn't about that. This is about the Chamorro people and an injustice. And we're righting a wrong that's 500 years old, and it's just to give the Chamorro people a choice. No, it's to construct a situation where a argument could be made that there is a sound movement for independence, for separation here on the island. Anyone who's really serious about decolonization, and that's nobody on that commission, because decolonization would mean the island of Guam would be decolonized. I would be decolonized. I've lived in a colony for the last 57 years. No wonder I'm such a crackpot, right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your support. Yeah, so if you're going to decolonize, that means the island of Guam is no longer a colony. It's separated, it's a state, or a part of a state. So the so-called Commission on Decolonization doesn't have anything to do with that. It's Chamorro self-determination. It's a Gwexit operation, government of, by, and for Chamorros. And that's all it's about. Now, I can understand that, but the constant attempts to mislead people into thinking that that commission is involved in decolonization doesn't sit very well with me, someone who does pay attention to this kind of stuff. So, that's...
So if we have no chance of statehood, what are our chances of Commonwealth?
Commonwealth is not a political status. It's just more in an unincorporated territory, perhaps following my approach, which is to say that an unincorporated territory has an awful lot of advantages, a lot of tax advantages, financial advantages, even governmental advantages. So what we should be doing, instead of constantly kvetching, whining, and moaning, we should go to Congress and try to improve our status as an unincorporated territory as much as we can. That would be my approach to it. But anyone who's really serious about independence, about decolonization, should then be asking for just one thing. There should be a ballot, and the ballot would say, should Guam separate from the United States and become an independent sovereign country? Yes or no? And if we had that ballot, I wouldn't even care who voted. But until we answer that question, we're just throwing good money after bad. So I hope that answers your question, Tom.
I totally agree.
Okay, well, good to hear from you again, Tom.
All right, buddy.
And I've got another Joe on the line. Another Joe, I'm going to get to you right after the break.
Knowing that we have choices in medical providers locally and outside of Guam is important and reassuring. This is the reason why Calvo Select Care provides quality health care options to its members. From a wide array of local, primary, and specialty doctors and clinics to a comprehensive hospital network on island and outside of Guam, you can trust Calvo Select Care to be there for you. Federal employees and annuitants enroll today. Call 477-9808 for more information.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are, back again. Tall Tales. Welcome back, international radio listening audience. I've got another Joe on the line. This is not you now, Real Joe Cruz.
No, sir, it's not.
This is another Joe. And if you want to join, if you want to get in the queue out there, international radio listening audience, 8255. That's how you did it, right, Joe?
Uncle Bob.
Yes, sir.
Like when you know, you're continually having to re-explain the situation with these the so-called decolonization. It feels like a broken record or deja vu all over again. But I want to thank you for doing that, Uncle Bob. Appreciate it, because it seems as though a lot of our contemporaries are kind of slow, including myself sometimes, to comprehend. So I think some of the key issues to highlight are there's still a demographic. There's still a part of the population that wants to stay in a sense looking and feeling as though they are loyal Americans to Uncle Sam and our fellow Americans stateside. So in that context, we want to say, hey, those other choices are bad, and we don't want that. And so I don't know how we would have this the ability to stay U.S. citizens while changing the jurisdiction not being of a U.S. Citizen status. I think those things are not they're not possible. I don't think they're I'm not sure the word is to identify having two things that are not compatible. It just seems not compatible. But at the same to continue on beyond this feeling of wanting to stay loyal, patriotic Americans, there is a feeling of not being able to voice concerns or be have a voice. And I can't help but feel like one of the bigger issues has been with the compact impact, because a lot of people in Ireland can comprehend budgets, balancing budgets and costs just within your family. You have a lot of family squabbles over finances and how much help you're gonna help other relatives, and you have people showing up at our shores and our doorstep, which we have no blood ties to, not related to at all, and all of a sudden we're paying for their kids to go to school, and guess what? They're having more kids than we are. So we have we're averaging 2 to 4 kids, and they're showing up with 6 to 10 kids, saying you want us to pay for what? And it's our law. We kind of done it to ourselves. We have to, because everyone, and I noticed one of your platform issues there, Uncle Bob. Every individual here on island that's a minor has the right to access to an education. Of course, that has to be paid for by someone, and Uncle Sam isn't footing the bill, right? Because they're not paying everything we claim that need to be paying, then we're stuck holding the bill. So once you start bringing money into the factor of the equation, we're starting to feel like, how much of a loyal American, patriotic American do I feel like when I'm being, footing the bill? And so there's the key issue, is we are Americans. And last time I checked, that's supposed to mean something important. So we have a system stateside now. We're thousands of miles away from mainland USA, but we're still Americans. We have technically access to the system. If we feel as though we are not being compensated duly for the a big expense like compact impact and other issues, then we should find a way to better organize. I think go stateside and say, hey, how much do you want us to cover for you in international diplomacy? Because we know this is really about us winning over our surrounding neighbors in favor of the U.S. instead of going to China, communist China. So that's the real issue right there. That's why they're getting just about everything it seems that they're asking for. They're not even U.S. citizens, and it seems like they're getting what they want. Whereas here we are, U.S. citizens, and we're not getting half the things we think we should be getting. But the question gets to be, are we asking appropriately in the right way? Or is it appropriate to ask even? And then you were suggesting that if certain individuals were to come out and openly say, hey, this is really about Chamorro self-determination, then you could at least respect that position whether or not you agreed with it. And I think I want to connect that to the concept of, hey, we should be comprehensive and say, hey, this is an issue of having a voice and being heard, and we're not doing that well enough as Americans, and we need to organize better and do that. So as far as attention to Chamorro culture and not having people worried about an extinction of Chamorro-ness or Chamorro values, there's just things stateside called the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I don't know if it's possible, but that's something that people don't seem to want to ask the question. You could possibly say take maybe 15 to 25% of land areas returned by the federal government. Say, hey, well, let's have a Native American reservation for Chamorro tribe in these small areas, and have something like American Samoa, where it seems as though close to half the ethnic Samoan nation is in American Samoa. Another half is a monarchy kingdom of Samoa. So I don't know if it's in any way comparable or we can have something similar where we have a sense of a Chamorro identity in a reservation, or even say, hey, let's have independent with 15 to 25% of the land and have a Chamorro independent monarchy or whatever, similar to Samoa. I don't know if these things are possible, but they're not asking the question. And is it really about wanting to be independent and not a U.S. citizen, or if it's those who want to stay U.S. citizens, is it possible to have a reservation? I don't know if it's way off, but it just seems to me to be a better fit or better explanation of a direction we could go. But what do you think? I've been talking all this time. Does any of that, the things I said, make any sense at all, or just totally nonsense? What do you think?
Well, not as much sense as the things I say, of course.
No, I think you make more sense because you're speaking in legal issues.
Yeah,
terms,
and besides, I've got the microphone right in front of me here, so it's a great way of winning arguments. Well,
you got the ball pulpit right there, so yeah.
Well, let me pick up on some of the things you were talking about, Joe. Okay, let's start out with compact impact. We are the victims of American foreign policy because the ability to live and work in the United States and take advantage of those things that we take for granted is a prize beyond price to just about anybody else in the world outside of Western Europe. So that's a real carrot to dangle in front of the freely associated states. The fact that if they go along with our treaty demands, that their citizens can come and live here and take advantage of living here. And that's part of American foreign policy. But this is not the first time this has happened. I've got relatives in South Florida, and I've go back and forth from there sometimes. I've lived there once upon a time. And when Fidel Castro came into power, the United States did everything it possibly could to encourage Cubans to leave Cuba and come to South Florida. They had what was called the wet foot, dry foot policy. And that is that anybody who could get on a rubber boat or whatever and plant 1 foot on a dry beach in Florida could stay and could become a permanent resident and ultimately a naturalized citizen of the United States. You'll recall that Castro took advantage of that with his so-called Mariel boat lift. He emptied out the criminal prisons in Cuba, put them on boats, and sent them to the United States. So the people who lived in South Florida said, this really sucks. The attitude was, we can understand the United States facing off with Cuba. It's not good to have a communist power so close by, armed with Russian weapons. But the whole burden is falling on South Florida, and it did. You know, if you go to Miami right now, if you were to land in the airport in Miami, you'd think you'd landed in some Latin American country. It's not at all like the Miami that I remember back in the 1950s. I think it's a great place, and Cubans have really been good for South Florida, but still, it's kind of the same thing that happened to us here. All of a sudden, we have to play host to a group of people from some other islands and become an instrument of U.S. foreign policy, and we're picking up the tab. Now, the second part of your question is, are we doing what we ought to be doing in order to get properly reimbursed for these things, or else put a stop to it? And my answer is no. You know, we have a non-voting delegate to Congress, and I know it's very popular in the separate sects. Say, well, you know, we can't even vote in Congress. But I've been through this before. We have a non-voting delegate in Congress who has an office in the House office building, has all the perks and privileges of any other congressman, serves on committees, is able to do log rolling in committees, etc. I've heard Robert Underwood say that, you know, not being able to vote is a handicap, but it can be overcome by building relationships. So we're in that situation where we can build those relationships, and we ought to be much more aggressive in pursuing this. You know, it occurs to me that maybe what we should be doing is asking the feds, you know, because we have so many people from the federated states that wind up in our criminal justice system, build us a prison to put these people in, or build us a few, or build us a few, or build us a few schools or something like that. But I don't think we're being aggressive at all. Finally, Lulian Guerrero has said, when you sit down and negotiate with the federated states, we want to be in the room. We want to at least be observers. Now, I used to say, if I were the Washington delegate, when it got time for those negotiations to start, I would get myself a can of gasoline and sit out in the parking lot with a book of matches, and I'd say, either you guys let me in, or I'm going to self-immolate right here in the parking lot, because what you're doing affects us a whole lot more than it affects you. But I just don't see that kind of advocacy. So I agree with you on that point. As far as reservations are concerned, I come back to this quite often. If you were to look at Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, you'll find this language in the first paragraph. Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, etc. And at paragraph 3, to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So Indian tribes, as mentioned in the Constitution, are what lawyers call sui generis. They're one of a kind. So every Indian tribe that there ever was in existence at the time that the Constitution was adopted. So I'm up against a break, Joe, so I'll tell you what.
But I'll hang up. Thank you for your time there, Bob.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to come back and finish answering your questions right after this break. Good call. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My big hot pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for a limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, so here we are. We've got about 8 more minutes till the beginning of that big halftime show. And Jim, I think I'm going to get you in before that, but I just want to spend a couple more sentences on the call that I got from another Joe. Indian tribes, as I mentioned here in the Constitution, every Indian tribe that there ever was in the United States was in existence at the time the Constitution was adopted. Now, I know that the smart guy over there, the smart money, the guy on the Easy Boy, he said, well, I just heard yesterday that they recognized another Indian tribe. Well, recognition means that that Indian tribe was able to come up with some proofs to show that in 1781, it was in existence. There are no new Indian tribes. I've heard efforts to equate, quote, Chamorros with Indians, and it's not an apt comparison at all. Point one, being an Indian doesn't get you anywhere. It's tribal membership that gets you onto the reservation and some of the other things that come along with it. Point number two, if you've ever been to any of the Indian reservations in the western United States, you know, like the Navajo or some of the Pueblo Indian reservations, I don't see that as really something that anyone would want to strive for, but different strokes, I suppose. I don't know if we were to able to define what culture is, and even anthropologists will go after that one. I don't know that we would be able to define the Chamorro culture in such a way that it requires a piece of dedicated land in order to practice. So I think these are all interesting ideas that another Joe had. But finally, my analysis is that if Guam did separate from the United States, those who are United States citizens right now would be able to continue to be United States citizens unless they went through a renunciation process. My understanding is the only way a person can lose his citizenship, since a case called Ephraim versus Rusk, is if he were a naturalized citizen and he lied on his application. We've seen cases where guards at Nazi concentration camps lost their naturalized U.S. citizen because they lied on their applications for naturalization. But if you were a citizen because you were born here, I don't think you're going to lose it. Now, if after the separation, I think it's impossible that one born in the independent country of Guam would be a U.S. citizen by birth. So you covered a lot of ground there, another Joe. I hope I touched all your bases. If not, you can give us a buzz back tomorrow. In the meantime, let's see what Jim's got to say. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Bob. How's it going?
Real good.
Well, let me throw my 2 cents in there and totally agree with both of you with regards to the fact that we're just not getting the avid representation that we need. And yes, we are very much getting stuck with the burden of having to carry a lot of, the legal immigration related issues, like from all of the outer islands, etc. And look, I'm a fair guy. They're part of the compact agreement with the United States. And if they want to travel here and if they want to be able to, reside and work here, I don't have a problem with that. But we do need to be fairly and correctly compensated for literal actual costs of, like you were both just saying, law enforcement and, prison and different things like that. But at the same time, we should have maybe a reciprocal policy, and I'm going to expound on that a little bit. And to include being reciprocal in a lot of different things with a lot of different countries. You know, if they're going to charge a 100% import duty for a U.S. product that comes into their country, then we should charge 100% import duty for their product that comes into our country. If they will allow us to travel to their country for 30, 60, 90 days without having a visa, then we should allow them to travel to our country, you know, reciprocally. But if they're going to make us file for a visa, and if they're going to make us go through a formal background and security and all, then we should apply the same things to them, just as though they have the right to come here and be a resident, but they should not have the right to food stamps, welfare, Section 8 housing, you know, yada, yada, yada. If they don't afford that to us in their country or on their island, I don't think we should be bound and required to provide it to them. You know, I think President Trump said one time that you know, the United States has been the world's doorstep and welcome mat for, you know, 4 decades. And we've severely disadvantaged and disenfranchised our own country because of it. I don't know. What do you think, Bob?
Well, I think you're making some really good points there. That if one is coming to the United States, it's been part of U.S. immigration law going way back to the beginning of immigration law that one who wants to emigrate to the United States must show that he won't be a public charge. And Trump is just now beginning to enforce that. But, yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a wide open welfare state citizen and open borders at the same time. And it would seem that that's kind of the situation with our neighbors to the south. They're supposed to come here. They come not as immigrants, but as habitual residents, people from the FAS. And they're habitual residents so long as they work here or are getting an education here. Hanging around under a tree drinking six-packs does not fit into either of those categories, but we're not enforcing that provision. And, of course, it's not ours to enforce. Territorial governments don't enforce immigration law. So I got to agree with you, Jim. Got it coming up on the big halftime show, so thank you very much for calling.
Yep, thanks for the call, Bob. Appreciate it.
All righty. So here we are coming up on that big halftime show. The marching band, the drill team, the cheerleaders, the sword swallowers, the fire eaters, the life-size statues of the real Joe Cruz mounted on trailers. We'll be back in about 7 minutes.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Saying the report will speak for itself. I'm Jane Metzler, Fox News. Today is the day that House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff unveils the impeachment report on President Trump. Members of the committee get their first look at it behind closed doors. Tuesday evening, members vote on whether to send it to the House Judiciary Committee, which holds its first impeachment hearings on Wednesday. White House counsel Pat Cipollone declining to participate in the hearings, calling the inquiry baseless and highly partisan, noting the president won't even be in the country on Wednesday. Monday morning, the president leaves for London and will have meetings with other leaders in the NATO alliance. Anti-government protesters wanted Iraq's prime minister ousted, and they got what they wanted, but at great human cost.
Over the weekend, Iraqi Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi submitted his resignation to parliament as bloody protests continue to rock the country. Now, according to the Iraqi constitution, the current president, Barham Saleh, will have 15 days to run the government until a new prime minister is appointed and a new cabinet is formed. Over the past month, more than 400 people have been killed and thousands injured as anti-government demonstrations continue. This weekend, at least 2 people were killed as clashes erupted in the city of Najaf. Security forces used live ammunition and tear gas. The bodies were then carried through the streets from the mosque to the grave.
Fox's Trey Yingst. Utility crews having trouble getting around in an area northeast of Los Angeles to restore power. People there spending another night in the dark after the second major winter storm in less than a week dumped heavy snow in the area. A third storm is now headed their way. America's listening to Fox News.
Rain. It's nature's way of cleansing the earth. Yet by the time that rainwater makes its way to your home, it may not be exactly the same as nature created it. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve the quality of the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home, so you can be sure your water is clear, clean, and fresh, just as nature intended it to be. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
We understand what matters to you because at Docomo Pacific, we're a family too. With the Now Family program, mom, dad, and kids stay connected on the latest devices the whole family can enjoy. For just $155 a month, get 3 lines with 30 gigs of 4G LTE data each, and endless use of your favorite apps without affecting your monthly data bucket. Add more, get more, save more. Docomo Pacific, better together. Some conditions apply.
An early morning shooting Sunday in New Orleans, 10 people wounded.
Officers were actually there in that very block where someone decided to open fire on people. Police say they initially thought they were being targeted because those shots were fired so close to them. The shooting happened around 3:30 near the corner of Bourbon and Canal Streets at the edge of the French Quarter. Patrols were already beefed up in that area because of this weekend's annual Bayou Classic football game between Grambling State and Southern universities.
Fox's Christina Coleman. A man was questioned, police declining to say whether he had anything to do with that shooting. A stern warning from the UN on climate change.
The world's attempts to stop climate change have been utterly inadequate, so says UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. In comments before the start of a 2-week international climate conference in Madrid, the UN chief said the impact of rising temperatures, including more extreme weather, is already being felt around the world with dramatic consequences for humans and other species. He adds that the world has the scientific knowledge and the technical means to limit global warming, but what is lacking is political will. At the almost 2-week conference, delegates from almost 200 countries will try to put the finishing touches on rules governing the Paris Climate Accord. Sal Giangrasso, Fox News.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi led a congressional delegation to the conference. Speaking of climate, Frozen 2 kept a wintry wind at its back in its second week, setting a Thanksgiving record with a whopping box office bounty. Disney's Ice Princess sequel bringing in $85.3 million in the U.S. and Canada over the weekend, earning an unprecedented $132.7 million for the holiday frame of Wednesday through Sunday. I'm Jane Metzler, and this is Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So I hope you enjoyed that big halftime show that we celebrate every afternoon at 1700. It's really quite a show. I give a lot of credit to the real Joe Cruz.
I try, sir.
He's kind of the producer of that whole show, you know, coordinating the drill team and the marching bands and everything like that. Thank you, real Joe Cruz.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, so here we are back for the second half of Tall Tales, and I've got Lou versus a Shadow, Barnes versus Judge Munson, Jim Moylan versus the people of Jonia, Janella versus GovGuam employees, Therese Terlahi versus Governor Lou Leon Guerrero, Dr. Last versus Annie Berdallo, Jolene Uggan, and Larry Lizama, Antonio Gramsci versus Y'all. And I was looking at the Facebook comments during the break here, or during the halftime show, and I noticed in addition to the Schmidt list, James M. Schmidt posts on the Schmidt list from time to time, and James says, could you spend a couple minutes to explain the protests, riots in Hong Kong? Specifically, what are the students protesting? How did it get blown out of proportion? CNN and Fox stay on the violence, but not why. Okay, so I've added an item at the end of the card that reads like this, James M. Schmidt. Hong Kongers versus PRC. Hong Kongers being people who live in Hong Kong, PRC, People's Republic of China. So I don't even need to go back to the Tall Tales think tank and talk with our foreign policy experts about this one. I can answer this one. I don't know that I'll have time to do it today, but if I don't today, it is on the card and will be on the card tomorrow, James. So everything you wanted to know about Hong Kong but didn't know who to ask will be dealt with tomorrow. Okay, so now we've got Lou versus a Shadow. And I mentioned a little earlier what we're talking about when we're talking about shadow boxing. Shadow boxing means that you've got your fists up and you're dancing around and you're working on your footwork and you're throwing punches, etc. But there ain't anybody there. Nobody ever got knocked out when he was, nobody ever got knocked out when they were shadow boxing. So here it goes. This is Guam won't enforce cockfight ban. The federal ban on cockfight will take hold on December 20, outlining the practice in Guam and other U.S. territories. However, Guam senators who have also not yet held a public hearing on Senator Sabina Paris's Protecting Animal Welfare and Safety Act have effectively decided to ignore it. How bold of them. How courageous. Part 1, Chapter 18, or Chapter 13 of the 2020 budget states that, quote, the enforcement of the federal ban on cockfighting as enacted by the 2018 Farm Bill shall be the lowest priority of the government of Guam. Now, I'll tell you, when you're talking about the lowest priority of the government of Guam, you know those old stories that if you dug a hole and you kept digging long enough, you'd wind in China? That's about how you'd have to get to the lowest priority of the government of Guam. But let me pose this question. Which federal laws are high priority for enforcement by the government of Guam? Do you know the answer to that one, real Joe Cruz?
No, I don't.
The answer is none. It's not the territory's business to enforce federal laws. So when the senators say, we're not going to do that, that really requires a lot of courage. You know, now we went through this. We've had some litigation on this process. You remember America's most courageous sheriff, Sheriff Arpaio in Phoenix, Arizona, who took it upon himself to enforce federal immigration law and found himself in contempt of federal court and got in all kinds of trouble. Immigration law is not something that local officials enforce. This cockfight ban is not something that local officials enforce. Now we get to the real tough guy part of this article here. For her part, Governor Leon Guerrero will not be enforcing a ban. Boy. According to Carlo Branch, the governor's policy director, the 2018 Farm Bill, enacted in December, imposed a federal ban on cockfighting throughout the territories with a phase-in period of 1 year. The ban drew serious criticism from territorial residents and public officials who argue there is a cultural and historical significance to the practice. No input from the people of Guam was ever received. As a result, the Guam legislature passed an amendment that would make spending local funds to enforce this unfunded mandate. Well, there is no mandate, Tina. It's not an unfunded mandate. There is no mandate at all. As the lowest priority of the government of Guam, the legislature announced in August through the office of Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes. A House bill promising to reverse the ban was introduced in February, with Delegate Michael San Nicolas signing on as a co-sponsor, but the measure has been sitting in a subcommittee since March. Now, we get to the real tough guy part here. Here's how Lou Leon Guerrero really stands up and goes eyeball to the eyeball with the feds. While Leon Guerrero will not enforce the ban, she did meet with mayors to talk about the looming federal mandate. It's not a federal mandate, it's a federal law, Lou. Or maybe not Lou, maybe John O'Connor. Lou Leon Guerrero will not enforce the ban. She did meet with mayors to talk about the looming federal mandate. In the past, the mayors could seek authorization from the governor to hold cockfighting events during their village fiestas. The ban makes that local legislation moot. So she's not going to authorize the mayors to hold cockfights in their village. So here she is. Where's that federal mandate? Let me take a swing at it. I got it. Look out. Right uppercut. And then she says, but we're not going to have any more cockfights. That's really it's really courageous on your part, Lou. Okay, and then the statute mentions, as you were, the release mentions Senator Sabina Paris's Protecting Animal Welfare and Safety Act. And I have portions of the act here. Let's see, that's, I don't know if I have a public law number or bill number for it or not. Probably not. I don't. I forgot to write it down. But here's Section 4 of Sabina Paris's bill. Any person who, as you were, I got the wrong section here. Okay, yeah, it's Bill 185. This is an act to amend several chapters, etc., to establish the Protecting Animal Welfare and Safety Act. And read some portions of it. The legislature finds it is the intent of the government of Guam to properly protect and promote the well-being and safety of animals. As such, the Act reinforces existing standards for animal welfare, adds best practices to ban previously unaddressed forms of violence, such as bestiality. Well, I don't know. No more bestiality. In other words, no more sexual assaults on animals. That's going to be controversial. A new distinction between animal abuse and animal neglect is also included. The Act further establishes pre-conviction processes regarding rights and procedures for seizing an animal, on and on. Some really nice legislative findings talking about protecting animals. And then The bill would add a new section 70.10.4, animal fighting. No person shall cause, sponsor, arrange, hold, or encourage any animal to fight, menace, or injure another animal for the purposes of sport, amusement, or pecuniary gain. For the purpose of this section, a person encourages an animal to fight, menace, or injure another animal for the purpose of sport, amusement, or pecuniary gain if the person, one, is knowingly present at or wagers on such occurrence, fighting, etc., two, owns, trains, transport, possesses, breeds, equips an animal with intent such animal be engaged in an occurrence of fighting, menacing, etc., knowingly allows any such occurrence of fighting, menacing, or injuring for the purpose of sport, amusement, or pecuniary gain to occur on any property owned or controlled by the person, and so on. And in the definitional section of the Act, birds are defined as animals, as though we needed to do that. So, you know, this is really a good do-gooder bill. It's really a well-drafted Be Kind to Animals law. It's 34 pages long, and it leaves no doubt that the legislature will not countenance any conduct that would encourage animals to fight with one another for sport, except for one thing, for cockfighting. That's an express exception in the bill. Cockfight, being kind to animals is absolutely 100% mandatory requirement. If you don't, you run the risk of felony conviction, etc., except for one thing, cockfighting. I might spend a little more time on this one tomorrow. This is just a legislative masterpiece in hypocrisy. And once again, if you were to, yeah, I don't have that page either. It's so long. I didn't print out all the pages. I probably should have, because it's kind of like the bill by St. Augustine, Terlahi, and Terlahi about election reform. It looks like a law school examination. Anyhow, that's Lou shadow boxing. You know, I'm not going to enforce that, but I'm not going to authorize the mayors to have any more cockfights either. Now, when it comes to enforcing that cockfight ban, you know, when this story first broke a year ago, there was a lot of huffing and puffing. Well, I've been cockfighting all my life, and I learned how to learned to start from my father and my grandfather. I don't care what they say. I'm going to keep doing my cockfighting. Let them come and get me. And then local officials just won't enforce. Nobody on Guam is going to enforce that. It's nice, but nobody's going to enforce it. Nobody's going to pay any attention to it. And my analysis then is the same as it is now. If it is, in fact, against federal law, it might not be the target of any federal enforcement, but it might very well be the predicate to federal enforcement. Now, if you've ever been to a cockfight, you know that there's an awful lot of money exchanging hands at cockfights. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Just a little bit of money.
Yeah. Now, did you ever notice the computer, that big bank of computers, where they keep track of every penny that exchanged? No. You know, so if, I don't know that it's ever happened, but if you ever wanted to engage in money laundering, a good place to do it would be somewhere where there are large amounts of unrecorded cash floating around. And it's the norm that the money changes hands repeatedly during the night. So you take that. You take the fact that it may very well be that some drug dealers like to frequent cockfights. So you wrap it all together, drug dealing, money laundering, occurring at an event that's against federal law. That might be enough to entice the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the Drug Enforcement Administration to come in and raid a cockfight. And, you know, when they do these raids, one thing they really like to do is gather up assets under the asset forfeiture law. Some of that money goes to local government, some of it they get to keep. So if you got a place where you can make a really good argument that drug dealing, money laundering, and a violation of a predicate federal law are occurring, and there's a lot of cash floating around, that would seem to me to be a pretty lucrative target for a couple of, if not more, at least 2 federal agencies. So don't take a whole lot of comfort from the fact that our courageous, the courageous 15 at the legislature are ignoring the federal law. That probably won't serve as much of an affirmative defense if you were ever got caught engaging in illegal activity at a cockfight. So, in addition to her other skills, Lou has shown that she's a really good shadow boxer. Next, we have Tina Rose Munya Barnes versus Judge Alex Munson, who was the district court judge on Saipan for a long time. He's retired now, but he occasionally sits in the district court of Guam. And he has made a decision that apparently Tina Rose wants to do something about. And this story says, Speaker, UOG fails to comply with law by not disclosing McNinch settlement legal costs. And the story goes like this. The University of Guam has failed to comply with the law by not disclosing a settlement reached with Associate Professor Ron McNinch, along with legal expenses to reach a settlement, Speaker Barnes said. UOG wrote a $10,000 check to McNinch after reaching a settlement in 2018, while UOG's legal expense in the case was nearly $100,000. Munya Barnes on Friday said there will be a legislative oversight hearing on the settlement, along with related matters such as UOG's hiring of one government employee and a contract with a private firm of more than $450,000. Well, that's interesting. But before that, the Speaker asked UOG President Thomas Kreis to expeditiously submit relevant documents. Well, that's kind of you, Tina. In her letter to Kreis, the Speaker said the law requires that settlement of any claims concerning the government of Guam shall not be sealed and shall be open to public inspection. The Attorney General or Attorney for the agency shall send a copy of each settlement to the Speaker, Barnes said, citing the law. As chairwoman on the Committee on Human Resources, I'm concerned if an employee being paid by an entity receiving taxpayer funds raises concerns regarding discrimination due to race. The Speaker wrote. So I guess you're going to have an oversight over the Commission on Self-Determination, right, Speaker Barnes? The Speaker also raised concerns with a lack of transparency with regards to a settlement, especially when media reports indicate that about $100,000 was expended to reach a settlement. McNinch sued UOG in 2016, alleging the university retaliated against him after he complained about alleged employment discrimination at the institution. His lawsuit alleged the university passed him over for a promotion to full professor because he repeatedly complained about discrimination against minority and female applicants. He said there were critical flaws in the university's policies to promote and grant tenure to faculty. UOG in court documents said McNinch's allegations were frivolous. His complaints about the university's employment practices happened long before he was considered for a promotion, and there was no link between the issues, it stated. Besides the McNinch settlement, Barnes also brought up findings of an Office of Public Utility audit on Guam's legal services, showing that UOG employed one government attorney and spent an average of $170,000 each year on attorney's fees. That same audit shows that in addition to the government attorney that was hired by UOG, the UOG also executed a contract with a firm to the tune of $456,292. Well, these are all interesting things, and it's several different stories here. But with respect to the settlement agreement, McNinch petitioned Judge Munson in the district court to make the contents of that settlement agreement public. According to the news story, one of the tenets of the agreement was that the provisions of the agreement were not to be disclosed. And Munson said, well, you know, a deal's a deal. I'm not going to order that they be disclosed. So I wonder when Tina has her oversight hearing if she'll issue a subpoena to Judge Munson and ask him why he made that decision. In any case, I would expect an awful lot of follow-up on some of the issues raised here. For instance, what was the name of the law firm that got the $500,000 contract? I think you probably could have told a reporter that if you knew about it, Tina. Okay, moving on to the next item on the calendar here. Jim Moylan versus the people of Jonia. And Jonia, and the title of the article here, Jonia Mayor will be on leave without pay past December 23rd as recall signatures drive begins. Friday night marked the start of a signature drive for a petition to recall Jonia Mayor Jesse Bloss. Bloss has been in federal detention since September 18, and my analysis is this. The office of mayor in Jonia has been vacant since Bloss has been in the pokey. You can't be an inmate, you can't be in pretrial detention and be in jail and be a mayor at the same time. The Election Commission has the ability to declare a vacancy and call a special election, but of course the Election Commission, in accordance with its usual custom, acted like this was an extremely hot potato, pulled on their potholder gloves and said, we're not going to deal with this. In the meantime, the folks in Jonia, the Taugizetnya, have not had a mayor since the, let's see, what was that date? Have not had a mayor going all the way back to, what was that date? September 18. There's been no mayor in Jonia since September 18. Now, I think some of the other villages kind of feel the same way, even though their mayors aren't in jail because their mayors aren't doing much for the village. But, you know, if we're going to elect them, they need to be on the job and they need to be doing their jobs. A guy named Franklin Hitton has started a recall petition. Hitton said he will also try to convince senators to vote in favor of recalling the mayor, since that would be a faster route than getting nearly 1,000 Jonia resident signatures. So the legislature has the ability to recall a public official. Interesting question is, why haven't they done it so far? Why didn't they do it, you know, after the office became vacant, when it became apparent to everyone that Bloss is going to be in jail until February 4th. So first on the list, Hitton senators was Jose Pido Terlahi, chairman of the committee with oversight of mayors. Terlahi's office on Friday said the senator would have to see the consensus of his colleagues before considering the matter, but said the senator will entertain concessions with their concerns. Well, that's pretty big of him, that the mayor would actually talk to people from Jonia and listen to their concerns, but he's not going to do anything concerning a recall until he determines the consensus of his colleagues. Now, here's how that works. You stick your finger in your mouth and you hold it up in the air and you try to determine which way the wind is blowing, and then you go with the flow, so to speak. Well, you're the committee chairman there, Jose Terlahi. Don't you think you ought to be out molding some consensus in favor of the folks in Jonia? Don't they deserve a mayor? Are you going to make everybody do things the hard way? Or are you the typical politician who says, oh, no, I don't want to touch the mayors because it's political suicide. Maybe they won't support me next time. So the heck with the people of Jonia. They'll just have to do without. And then Senator Jim Moylan said, while the situation is unfortunate, Blas is innocent until proven guilty and can legally maintain his seat. Question, Jim Moylan. If Blas is innocent until proven guilty, why has he been in jail since September? What day was that? Why has he been in jail since September 18 if he's innocent until proven guilty? And the fact that you think he's innocent until proven guilty, does this improve the services to the people of Jonia? Innocent until proven guilty is not a job protection plan, as I've had to explain more often than too many times. If a person is before a criminal trial, the burden of going forward and the burden of proof is on the prosecution. And unless the prosecution can prove its case beyond beyond a reasonable doubt, the defendant is entitled to a not guilty verdict. Nobody ever comes out of a criminal trial with a piece of paper that says innocent on it. That's not part of the process. And nowhere in the process does anyone of official standing stand up and say, this man is innocent. Now, pay no attention to the fact that he's in prison stripes and in jail. He's innocent until proven guilty. Okay, we got the seventh inning stretch coming up here. I'm going to come back to this item, and we'll work through the rest of the
Make wish lists come
card.
true this holiday season with Coast 360. For a limited time, get 1% off your personal loan rate when you apply by December 31st, 2019. Loans up to $50,000 with flexible terms and no application fees. Apply online or at any member center. Terms and conditions apply. See print ad or Coast360FCU.com for details. May your holidays be merry and bright with Coast 360 Federal Credit Union. Together, we thrive.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Try their featured special for December. Seafood Lau Lau, a medley of salmon, shrimp, scallops, and fresh spinach wrapped in tea leaves, steamed to order, topped with soy butter sauce and your choice of starch. Visit Mezcla in Agotnya and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
So there we are, seventh inning stretch, Chicago, Illinois, Wrigley Field, center field bleachers, etc. I got a phone call here. Jack, I'm going to get to you in a couple of seconds here. I'm going to put Jesse Blas in the pokey here, but I do need to comment on a couple of things, the posts that popped up during the last break. And I got one from Don Ed Kilani. Don Ed Kilani says, how do you figure specifically? They've been U.S.-dependent sovereign nation countries since the mid to late 1980s. I think he's talking about the freely associated states, the Republic of the Marshalls, the Republic of Palau, and the Federated States of Micronesia. They are not dependent sovereigns. They are sovereign countries in a treaty relationship with the United States. I suppose if you were looking for a dependent sovereign, one of the 50 states might come under that category, although the usual term is subordinate sovereigns. Each of the 50 states is a subordinate sovereign in the American Union. And let's see what else Don Ed Kalani says. He says, hang on just a second here. He says, Don Ed Kalani, Bob, if enforcement of habitual resident standards isn't the role of Guam territorial government, so then whose role is it? And why aren't they funded in enforcing the standards of habitual resident status? Well, the answer is it's an immigration responsibility. So the same folks that enforce immigration law, immigration and customs enforcement would be the ones that have the responsibility. And like so many other things, I guess they studied priorities from Tina Rose Munya Barnes, and they put it on the bottom of their priorities. It's not very high on their list of things to do, and therefore it just doesn't get done. Then he's got his remark about dependent sovereigns. And then, I thought there was something else I needed to answer also. I guess he posted the same thing twice. Okay, so anyhow, I think we did enough with compact impact and those things. I'm going to go now, and I have a caller here whose penchant is to tell me that I don't know Jack.
Hi, welcome back.
It's good to be home, Jack.
Yeah, missed you there for a while. Yeah, I couldn't hear what you said earlier because it was kind of muffled. But I hope you're doing well. You still have that cough.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Jack. My cough's getting better every day. I've been practicing a lot, and
well, that's great. I hope you're doing well. And I want to wish you a happy Advent.
Thank you.
And so, you were in the States for a while, and you probably heard this term being kicked around a lot by conservatives. The term is deep state.
Oh, yeah.
So my question to you, you could define it, but my question to you, do you think such thing exists here on Guam? After hearing you talk about Mayor Blas and the things surrounding him and why he's still mayor, do you think that such a clandestine operation exists here in Guam?
In a sense, yeah. I think what we have here on Guam is and the deep state primarily in the mainland resides in the bowels of the executive branch bureaucracy. And it's people who would go out of their way to make sure that the bureaucracy continues as it always has. And I think we have that same phenomenon here, that perhaps not with a degree of deviousness that the deep state has nationally, but I think, there's some people pretty well vested in the status quo. And I don't know if you listened to what I had to say about anonymous letters last week. There were 3 anonymous. I even got an anonymous letter myself, didn't I, Real Joe Cruz?
You did, sir.
Yeah, but it was just nothing but praise. But the author said he wanted to remain anonymous because he didn't want to be retaliated against by other talk show hosts. But anyhow, I think these anonymous letters are eminences of the deep state. It's 1 or 2 people who don't like their new director, maybe because the new director sets standards or requires things that weren't done before, etc. So a way of getting even with the new director is to publish an anonymous letter.
Yeah, and I'm kind of confused because, anonymous letter doesn't really mean a whistleblower, but yet it seems like you are using the term interchangeably.
I was?
Well, no, the way it sounded.
Oh, the way the media uses it. Yeah, I really criticize the media, because if you took one of those letters and put a single person's name on it, if you put Joe Cruz's name on the bottom of it and sent it around the media, they wouldn't pay any attention to it. They say, oh, it's just one guy. But if it's hey, this is anonymous, so it must be true. And I heard one radio commentator said, well, obviously the people that wrote this are afraid of retaliation. That's why it's anonymous. No, it's not. It's just trickery is what it amounts to. And it's the opposite of whistleblowing.
That's true. And we do have laws for whistleblowers here in Guam, don't we?
We do.
Okay, so they could have gone that route. So
yeah.
I have another. Yeah, the reason why I asked about the deep state and the similarities between what's happening here on Guam is that it seems that it's perfused not only through the executive but even through the legislature. And you being in the judiciary branch, I mean, what does that mean to you when certain people seem above the law? I mean, how does it affect you?
Now, are you talking about people that are found not guilty in criminal trials, or what exactly are you referring to?
Well, the meaning of the deep state and how it operates, how it just it infuses not only the like you said, the current policies of the bureaucracy now, not the executive, but the bureaucracy that's in place and entrenched, but also the clandestine way it's operated. In that it in the face it looks legal, but when you if I know this doesn't make sense. This stuff with the Chamorro Land Trust, this stuff with just certain things that just doesn't make sense, and when you throw it out to the light, and it seems that like certain operations here, are above reproach.
Well, the Chamorro Land Trust Act Commission certainly fits into that, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I just wanted to take because like you said, I'm wondering about the Mayor Blas thing too. Why isn't anybody? And it seems like there's entrenched, faceless individuals. We could just call them faceless people or groups of people that seems just embedded that to prolong this thing and wait for some sort of miracle. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like it's just being buried deeper and deeper. And then all of a sudden it's like, what happened to here? It's almost like when we had the thing with what was that senator with the that had that dealings in Saipan, and whether or not he was going to be censured or whether or not he's going to be
Espaldon.
And then all of a sudden it disappeared. It's like nothing happened, nothing came about it.
Yeah. Jim Espaldoni was finally able to run the clock out on it, and Fernando.
These sorts of activities, it leads me to believe, and that's why I made this comment before in Ray's show that we're no longer. It seems like we're no longer citizens of Guam. We've become subjects of Guam, and how do you reverse this thing? How do you make it right? And
well, of course, my answer, Jack, is 2 hours of Tall Tales Monday through Friday. And anybody who's not listening, get a hold of them and grab them by the ear and pull them before the radio, Jack.
Well, Bob, I'm glad that you're back, and I'm glad that you're doing well. And I wish you a happy Advent. And I will be listening now that you're back. If I don't listen, I listen to it later on Facebook or something.
Good call.
Or on YouTube. So either way, I listen.
Very good, Jack. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, have a great evening, Bob.
Thank you. So, the deep state and this whole Mayor Blas thing certainly has elements of it. Mayor Blas's recorded statements that he's got connections at the court and he can get you out of jail and he can do this, that, and the other thing for you. So when Jose Pito Terlahi and Jim Moylan, adai, when it appears that you're going out of your way to protect this guy, then the suspicion arises, are you part of this thing too? When Pito Terlahi says, well, I have to see the consensus of my colleagues. Now, consensus means this. If you have 14 colleagues and you are able to determine their desires, and 13 of them say, yeah, we should recall the guy, and one said no, then there's no consensus, because consensus means unanimous. And Terlahi says, I have to see the consensus, because he has to see the consensus of his colleagues. When, as the chairman of that commission, he has a responsibility, in my mind, of molding that consensus. And I think there can be only one outcome here. The guy's been in jail since September. There's been no mayor of Jonia. He's shown no desire to resign. He's drew his administrative leave. He's drawing his annual leave. He's just going to keep riding that horse until maybe the horse dies, or like Jack said, there's a miracle. So that's not a good performance for a senator, Jose Terlahi. A responsible way of doing it would be to do this. I have drafted the resolution. I'm circulating it for co-sponsors. Regardless of how many sign on, I will be introducing that resolution on Monday, and we will take it to the floor and see what the pleasure of the body is, because it's just not right for the people of Jonia not to have a mayor, because their mayor's in jail and has been there since September. Jim Moylan, this baloney about innocent until proven guilty. The same thing goes for you. You're a Republican. You're the minority. You should be drafting that resolution. You should be holding your town hall out in Jonia to determine how the people feel, not playing it safe with his BS about innocent until proven guilty. He'll be innocent until proven guilty. Well, the burden of proof will rest on the prosecution if he goes to trial. If he pleads out, there's no innocent till proven guilty in a plea bargain. Now, aren't you going to feel pretty foolish, Jim Moylan, if Bloss runs this down, figures out he can rat out a couple of people, enters into a plea bargain in order to avoid going to jail, and one of the conditions of his plea bargain is he vacates his office, and you're sitting around making up nursery rhymes about, well, he's innocent until proven guilty? Irresponsible. And then Moylan also went on to say this: the circumstance is very odd, and I believe we lawmakers need to address our election statutes to find a way to prevent this lack of leadership due to legal problems. Well, a lack of I'll tell you where you can find a lack of leadership, right? It's among yourself and 14 other senators. And then, of course, if I could use the horse analogy again, here's Jim Moylan saying, this is a very unusual circumstance. The horse has gotten out of the barn. So rather than chase the horse, capture him, and bring him back, what we need to do is work on a better lock for the barn door. Okay, so we're coming up here to the home stretch. Next item on the calendar is Janela versus GovGuam employees. I might get to that before the end.
Lights, camera, fajita! Taste the sizzle at Chili's with our new fajita flavors, featuring the new all-star cast, the grilled stuffed avocado with southwestern shrimp topped with Santa Fe sauce, cilantro, limes, and queso fresco. Or the Monterey chicken, juicy chicken breast topped with barbecue sauce, mixed cheese, bacon, diced tomatoes, and chopped green onion, all served on a sizzling skillet with warm flour tortillas. Experience bold, sizzling fajita limited-time flavors only at Chili's. More life happens here, located at the Two Montans Plaza, second floor.
Attention
Attention federal employees and annuitants. Open season is running now through December 9 for FEHB plans. Voted PICA's best again for 2019, Take Care delivers comprehensive insurance coverage and quality health care when and where it's needed most. Take Care's popular supplemental wellness package provides cash incentives and gives members a choice of 19 fitness partners, including Paradise Fitness Center. To learn more, visit TakeCareAsia.com. Take Care, the first re-accredited health plan in the region.
Talk Tells with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Call to the Post, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. The home stretch here on Tall Tales. I got about 7 minutes more before me and my cough can go home. At least my cough can go home. And we'll take it from there. So I've been talking about Jim Moylan and his silly position concerning the mayor of Jonia, who's been in jail since September. And everybody is going around saying, well, you know, his position isn't vacant just because he's in jail and can't do the job. That doesn't mean the position is vacant because no one has declared it vacant. In the meantime, a citizen of Jonia, a guy named Hiton, has taken it upon himself to recall Blas so that Jonia could have a mayor. Well, good for you. You at least have the courage of your convictions, and maybe instead of running for mayor, I'd prefer that you ran for senator because it appears that the kind of intestinal fortitude that you have is in short supply at the legislature. And then Moylan goes on to say, Moylan said, as for the recall, he would certainly support the measure, quote, if the compelling argument was raised during discussions, as we need to be cautious in what precedents we set. So, compelling argument is this, Jim Moylan. The mayor of Jonia was arrested by federal authorities and tossed in the pokey. He's got some really serious charges against him, and he's not going to come on for trial until at least February 4. That's a compelling circumstance. In the meantime, there is no mayor of Jonia. That's a pretty compelling circumstance. And then you use the word precedents. Well, what precedents are you setting? You know, people like to toss that word around. Well, I don't want to set a precedent. Well, you wouldn't be setting a precedent if you recall someone from office. What you do stands on its own bottom, and it has no predictive validity for a future occurrence of a similar event. But it should. You know, the precedent that you should establish is that any mayor who finds himself unable to do his work because he's in jail is going to get bounced from office. He's innocent until proven guilty. So we have a new job protection plan in the government of Guam. Innocent until proven guilty. If you steal from the police department and attempt to pay back the theft with a check that bounces, and you get transferred to the Department of Corrections, and you finally plead guilty to that charge, no one is going to discipline you because you're innocent until proven guilty. If you are in the National Guard and you have serious criminal sexual conduct charges against you, the Josephine Blas, the spokesman of the Guard, will tell you, we stick by innocent until proven guilty. It's in our Constitution. And you can probably write it out for a year until finally someone will say, well, we ought to separate this guy from the Guard. You know, kakistocracy is a word that I introduced a few days ago. Government by people least able to handle the job. And these are examples here. Innocent until proven guilty. I would have to see a consensus of my colleagues before I consider the matter of recalling the mayor. Okay, so much for that one. next we move on to Janela versus GovGuam employees. And this is one that ran, I think, Sunday in the Post. GovGuam workers help set up Christmas display. Okay, now before I go into this, I want to get this off my chest. Okay, are we ready? Real Joe Cruz, wish me a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, sir.
Christmas. Bah, humbug. So if you're out there in an international radio listening audience, you want to say, that Bob is a Scrooge, go right ahead, because I think that what my approach to this, my take on this, is the correct one, and I'm going to stand by it, even though some people would say, well, that guy doesn't have any Christmas spirit. Dozens of GovGuam workers were asked to help set up Christmas decorations at Skinner Plaza on the GovGuam clock. So some of the government employees were given this alternative. You can come in and do your regular job, you know, push papers or lift, you know, whatever it is that you do in your regular job. Or you could go and hang out down at Skinner Plaza, chat up your friends, talk on your cell phone, put up Christmas decorations. You could do that if you want to. You're still going to get paid to do it. Now, what do you think a lot of people are going to say to an offer like that, Real Joe Cruz?
I'll go decorate the park.
Yeah, I'll make the sacrifice. You know, I'll leave this incredibly hard and boring job that I do for the government of Guam. I'll leave it behind, and I'll make the sacrifice, and I'll go down to Skinner Plaza. Okay. So, dozens of government of Guam workers were asked to help set up Christmas decorations at Skinner Plaza on the GovGuam clock. But the workers hold jobs that aren't considered critical to government operations. Oh, they're not critical to GovGuam operations. The governor's spokesman confirmed. So they apparently walk through government agency and say, well, I'm going to pick this up tomorrow. I got a couple of things that are going to be on the re-list for tomorrow from today's calendar. Well, right now I've had about as much fun this afternoon as any individual should be able to have. It's always great to be able to talk to our international radio listening audience. Pues no adios, esta copa.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
In a few hours, President